Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to think differently about your health. And by the end of this video, I promise you will have a different perspective on your health. And through this different perspective, you can then begin to make the steps to really change your life. I mean, really begin to take control of your health, to look good, feel good, live a life of clarity, energy, and focus. My name is Scott Resnick, and I'm making these videos to give you the tools and the tips and the techniques to really turn around your health and to take charge. So imagine that you and I were taking a walk through ancient Greece 2,400 years ago. And we'd be walking through a market and looking at the beautiful clear skies and remarking to ourselves how fortunate we were to live on this big, amazing, flat earth. But Aristotle lived in this same time frame. And he didn't subscribe to this thinking. In fact, he physically changed his perspective by moving away from his hometown in Greece to the south. And what he noticed is as he moved further to the south, that the constellations in the sky changed their relationship relative to the horizon. So by physically changing his perspective, he was able to begin to think differently about planetary sciences, recognizing that we had to be on a ball and we couldn't be on, or a sphere, and we couldn't be on a flat disk for this to have taken place. When we start to think differently about our healthcare and look at our health from a different perspective, we can really begin to make some changes, and that's what I want to share with you in this video. What I've done with my patients over the last decade, and what I'm sharing with you today, is that we need to look at our health using different perspectives. Because when we start to look at our health from different perspectives, we're not relegated to just waiting until we have a disease which requires a drug, and that's the current paradigm. In fact, in our current conventional medical paradigm in which I was trained, there's not really a measurement for someone's state of health. It's only a degree of illness. So check out these different perspectives. Tell me if you think it helps you to think differently about how the body works. So what I do with my patients is I start to examine the body from a set of interrelated systems, and these have a dependent relationship to one another. And on the foundation of all of our health is this concept of nutritional status. So if you think about it, our two most important nutrients are air and water. And I say that because if we're deprived of oxygen, we can only live for about another 5 or 6 minutes. If we don't have water, we can live for maybe 1 to 3 days. So think about some of the other nutrients that are so important to keep a human body working well. And we've got our minerals and our plant-based nutrients that are so important for our enzymatic processes and function. We have the ingestion of the right type of fats that helps to manage our immune system and our cellular membranes. And finally, we need to ensure that we have an adequate intake of vitamins and amino acids. Now recall there are 22 different amino acids and 9 of these are essential. So when I use the term essential talking about anything in the human body, it means that our body lacks the ability to make these substances and we need to get them from our diet. The next system that I work with my patients on is that of energetics. So think about it. Any animal on this planet needs to be able to take in energy from the environment in the form of food. And then it needs to decide what to do with this energy. Do I save it and store it away for a long winter? Do I use it in the here and now to make my escape? There are 3 hormones in the human body that are intimately associated with managing energy in our body. And those 3 hormones are insulin, thyroid, and cortisol. And in an earlier video, I went over how these are related to one another. The next system that I look at with my patients is that which involves the gut and the immune and the brain. If you think about it, we are a walking, talking petri dish. Our body needs to establish barriers against the viruses, parasites, and yeast that live and bacteria in the outside environment that want to feast on the water, amino acids, proteins, fats that we have inside of us. So our body establishes barriers to protect us. We basically have 3. The first is the mucosa, which lines our sinuses and extends down into our lungs. But this is a fairly hard barrier to breach. The next barrier is that of our skin, and this is a fairly waxy and thick layer. It's covered with hair, and it's also the largest organ in our body by weight. And finally, we have the barrier that separates our gastrointestinal tract from really the entire outside world. We are interacting daily with the 100 trillion bacteria that live in and on our body. But yet at the same time, we need to use the same gastrointestinal system to take in all those nutrients that we needed. This barrier needs to be established and it needs to be well maintained. And this is absolutely critical to a state of optimized health. The next system that I review with my patients has to do that of our ability to detoxify. Now, we are toxic from even basic biological processes. So when you look into the molecular processes that make energy in our body, we make a toxic byproduct, which are known as reactive oxygen species. We need to buffer those. But in our modern world, we are also exposing ourselves to any number of different xenotoxins. These are toxins that aren't made by our body. Things like pesticides, herbicides, plastics, lotions, creams, oils that we put on our skin, alcohol, tobacco. These are all toxins that over time begin to shift the balance towards a more toxic state as we're no longer able to buffer these toxins. As we develop more toxins, our biology doesn't work as well. And the last system that I like to look at, which is really the composite endpoint of all of these other systems working together, is that of reproduction. In its simplistic form, the hormones associated with reproduction are estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and DHEA. And to be fair, both men and women have all of these hormones, albeit in different amounts. Clinically, when I see a man who is really struggling with an imbalance in these hormones, it's typically characterized by erectile difficulties, by a loss of drive, loss of libido, loss of energy, mood changes, irritability. Now, women can have some of the very similar symptoms as their hormone levels get off. But more commonly, I see changes in fertility and changes in menstrual cycling. And all this makes sense. I mean, if you are an animal in nature and you're nutritionally deficient, you don't have well-balanced energetics, so you're starving, you're toxic, your barriers are breaking down, that's probably not a good time to go and reproduce. And the last system that sort of seems to envelop all of these other systems is this concept of inflammation. Now, inflammation is a two-sided sword. I mean, we need to be able to generate inflammatory processes because inflammation is ultimately what keeps us alive when we cut ourselves or are exposed to a virus, a parasite, or a yeast. However, when we develop too much inflammation in the body, we begin to wear down all of the other systems. And I can tell you that all chronic conditions, from Alzheimer's to cancer to diabetes to autoimmunity to cardiovascular disease, are all, and this is supported with thousands and thousands of paper, they are all associated with a heightened inflammatory state. Hopefully through this video, I've given you a different perspective on which to evaluate your health, because as you set out to address each of these different systems individually, stack them together so that they work together, this is what creates a state of health in the body and moves us away from one of disease. I hope that you enjoyed this video and learned something. Of course, if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button, comment, subscribe. I'll be sure to respond to all comments personally. I think that you have the capacity to understand your body and to be able to avail yourself to all of these different tests to really begin to get well. Once again, I'm Scott Resnick. Thanks for your time. I know it's valuable, and I will see you in an upcoming video.